Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and GameFound over the next week. And if you're new to the channel, we do this every week going over all the upcoming campaigns, so if you want to stay up to date, this is definitely the place to be. And we do have a ton of campaigns this week, so there's a lot to look forward to. But before I get started, I do like to go over some new announcements and discoveries that I just found out about over the past week. I don't really have too much to go over, but there is a James Bond game that was announced, and this one is called Spectre the board game. And in this one, you're actually playing as the villain, trying to become the #1 villain and going up against all sorts of gadgets and characters from the James Bond universe, and 007 himself will be showing up to try and thwart your plans. And if you're interested in this one, you can go ahead and pre-order it on the Modifius website. And we're just creeping into the month of September, so if you want to see a little bit more into the future and see what games are expected so far, definitely go ahead and check out Board Game Cove's channel, because he just put out a video going over the entire month and letting you know of all the games that we know about right now. He also offers a ton of other content on his channel, so if you want to get different reviews or playthroughs or even follow-ups on these different campaigns, especially from a value perspective, he's definitely a channel that you'll want to follow if you haven't checked him out already. But we have a ton of games to cover, and I'm already starting this a little bit late, so let's get into it. And these first 5 games I've actually already covered in the past. Either they launched, got cancelled, and got a rework and they're getting relaunched now, or I was expecting them to launch and then they just got postponed until this week instead. So I'll just go through each of these 5 games and let you know what date they're going to be launching and what games they are. And the first one is for USC Reach, and this one's going to be launching on September 5th. And then the remaining ones are all launching on September 6th, and that's Forsaken, Atlas Lost, Rise of the New Sovereigns, Proxy War, as well as Magical Friends and How to Summon Them. So I'll just go and roll all that footage for you right now. We have USC Reach, and this plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 45 to 90 minutes to play. And this is a competitive space exploration deck building card game where players are racing to gather their crew, fly through space, assign their crew to the different departments in their ship in order to navigate the different locations and land safely on a new planet to score victory points. The game plays over a series of rounds, and each round a new location tile is going to be revealed, and this is going to provide some different opportunities and objectives for players to try and complete. And players will be able to visit these different locations and try to complete the challenges by assigning enough crew cards to meet the different skill requirements of the different challenges. And also on a player's turn, they'll be able to recruit new crew to their ship to add more skills into the mix, and they'll also be able to upgrade their ships. And to win the game, you're going to want to be the first to complete the different challenges at the different locations, because that's going to score you the most points. And this is a sandbox adventure game where players are going to be attempting to establish themselves as a legend in the land, and they're going to be doing this whatever way they can, and each character has a personalized branching story that players can explore, and depending on the decisions that you make, the results can vary from game to game. I'm just jumping in here quick to say that this one is our Discord pick of the week. Enjoy! Players will be navigating through their own personal story as well as a public story, trying to complete the objectives of both in order to earn legend points to make them the most renowned in the land. And this game offers a lot of different paths to victory. Players can hunt down bounties, perform odd jobs, fulfill prophecies, or even try their luck at gambling. You're probably not going to be choosing these randomly, because you're going to want to pick the opportunities that have the best chance of success based on the gear, weapons, and skills that you were able to accumulate throughout the game. And at the end of a player's turn, they'll have the opportunity to trigger an event or an encounter, and these will have game-changing effects that can affect all players and permanently change the game moving forward. And of course, this can also grant you legendary points, because the bigger effect you have on the world, the more legendary you become. The first player to reach that level of reputation wins the game. And this is a competitive tech tree, resource management, and civilization game that's set in a world ruined by AI warfare. Players will be discovering lost technology and taking control of the new world, deciding where they want to go, what they want to focus on, and what they want to turn the world into. During setup, you're going to be choosing 3 out of 5 possible tech modules, and depending on the modules that you choose to include in the game, this is going to dictate what sorts of mechanisms are available, making each game very different from the last. Throughout the game, you're going to be using cards, collecting resources, and employing the tech that you've discovered in order to build up your own troops and gather fame faster than the players around you. The first player to score 30 points wins the game. I'm sorry that I don't have more info on this one. I did look around and I just really couldn't find anything, but the artwork looks amazing. The game looks really well put together. I wish I could say more on the gameplay, but it does look like one that a lot of people are looking forward to because it already has nearly 2,000 followers. So if that little bit of info has sparked your interest at all, I have links to this campaign in the description below and you can check it out once it launches, and I'm sure you'll find a ton of more info there. We have Proxy War, and this plays 2 to 8 players and takes about 120 to 180 minutes to play. And this is a competitive political game where players are going to be playing as different powers, either as the government, as rebel forces, or as a foreign power. The game's inspired by some other games like Catan and Diplomacy and blends in different elements to create a whole new experience. And the way that this game works is that it plays over 10 rounds, with each round having 3 phases. There's the gather resources phase, the negotiation and alliance, and then the action phase. For the gather resources phase, players are going to collect resource cards from the tiles that they control out on the board. And then we have the negotiation phase where players are going to work with their allies and enemies to reach their goals. And players will be allowed to trade resources and decide if they want to build factories together. And then during the action phase, players will be able to take turns performing the different actions that are available to them. And these different actions are to build, move, support, or bombard. Depending on the type of superpower that you're playing as, you're actually going to have a different endgame objective that will trigger you winning the game. If you're playing as the rebels or the government, then your goal is to try and eliminate the other. Or if you're playing as a foreign power, then your goal is to try and exploit the war and gain 10 victory points before the other players trigger their condition. The first player that does this wins the game, but if you're playing with a higher player count, then you'll actually have 2 winners in this game. We have another game that I'm going to be keeping a really close eye on because this one looks like a lot of fun, and it's called Magical Friends and How to Summon Them. And this plays 2 to 4 players. It takes about 60 to 90 minutes to play. And in this game, players are reclusive magicians that are trying to prove how popular they really are by trying to have the most friends in the tavern at the end of the game. But since you're a magician, rather than creating friends in the traditional way, it's just a lot easier to summon them. So players are going to be trying to summon different creatures as their friends, and then try and navigate them through this treacherous map to try and get them to the tavern by taking some different paths and trying to avoid certain obstacles on the way. And a neat aspect of the main board is that it is semi-modular. You do have the main map that's printed on it, but then you have all these different tiles that can cover different regions of the map and change the way that it behaves each time you play. And some of these tiles can even flip and go on the map, changing the dynamic of some paths even within a single play. And this game does have your typical play order that goes in a clockwise order, but it also has another layer on top of that that you can think of as your initiative, where players are going to be playing some different cards to try and decide what order they actually can take their actions in. So starting with the first player, they're going to be playing an initiative card, and then each card has a number on it. Once you use that, you can't use it for the rest of the game, so you're going to want to be strategic with how you do that. And then the players are going to perform their actions in the order of the cards that they played. And on your turn, you're going to be able to take a card from the shared market, which you can see at the top here. So if you're going first, you get first dibs on the cards available, and then players are going to add that card to their hand. A neat aspect of this game is that the cards all have different numbers on it for the different creatures that you can summon, and you're going to be pulling it out of this little board here by matching the number to your card. Each creature in this game is very unique, and they can come in small, medium, and large sizes, as well as good, neutral, and evil alignments. Each character also comes with its own movement options that can be used on a player's turn, and they each have their own effect that they can actually use as well and chain with some of the other monsters that you might have in your possession. And on a player's turn, they're going to be performing a couple actions, and they can choose to summon one of their creatures to the map, move one of their creatures that are already on the map, or activate one of their creatures' magical powers. Some creatures can also inflict damage or poison on other creatures on the map, so if you do get damaged, your creature is slain and removed from the map, and if you get poisoned twice, then you are also removed from the map. So the order that players try to perform their actions is going to be super important to try and avoid or create these opportunities, because the player that gets the most of their creatures to the end of the map at the tavern wins the game. And this is another game that looks very unique and different from any other game that I've ever seen, and it kind of reminds me a little bit of a reverse tower defense game where players are trying to move their units towards the tower, which in this case is the tavern. But rather than the tower defending itself, it's the different players that are pushing and shoving and eliminating each other along the way that's going to create all the conflict. Really neat idea here, and it looks like a lot of fun. Definitely one to check out, so if it sounds interesting to you, don't forget that you can click that notify me button to get notified when it launches. And we're back, and the next campaign I have for you, also launching on September 6th, is Fortify, and this plays 2 players and takes just 15 to 30 minutes to play. And in this game, players are competing in a water balloon fight. And at the start of each round, you're going to be drawing cards blindly from a deck, and then you're going to be placing them down in your play area in front of you, creating your fort. And the cards are going to be offering you some different shaped walls of different colors. You're going to be trying to connect these together in such a way to create as many enclosed areas as possible, because any area that you have is going to allow you to put different children there. That's going to give you more firepower and allow you to throw more balloons at your opponents. And the way that balloons are represented in this game are with dice. So for each child you have, that's going to allow you to roll 1 additional die. And as part of the round, you're going to be rolling all those dice, and each die is going to have a different color on each side, and that's going to indicate which walls that you're allowed to hit. So you're going to be matching those dice with the different walls and doing damage to your opponent's fort. And if you're able to get through the walls of the fort into the main area, you're going to start dealing damage to the other player, and if you're able to do at least 3 damage, then you win the game. And one thing to note here is that one side of the die also offers an umbrella, and these umbrellas are used to block incoming attacks. You'll be able to assign this to one of the dies placed against you in order to nullify that attack. And if this one sounds interesting to you, I have links to the campaign page in the description below. Also launching on September 6th, we have Dawn of Ulos, and this plays 1 to 5 players and takes about 60 to 90 minutes to play. And this is an economic tile-laying game set in the same world as Role Player and Cartographers. And in this game, players are going to be playing as gods, and you're going to be trying to manipulate 5 different factions in order to try and gain the most victory points for yourself. And each round in this game, every player is going to be replenishing their hand back up to 3 tiles, and then you're going to be taking turns placing a tile out on the board. And the way that the tiles work is they're actually double hex tiles, so you're going to have 2 hexes on a single tile, and they're going to have different terrain types on them. In order to place the tile out on the board, the terrain types on the tile have to match the terrain types on the board in the position that you're placing that tile. Each of the 5 factions in the game will have an associated miniature, and whenever there is a set of tiles out on the board that matches the base for that miniature, you can actually put that miniature out on that area of the board, as long as no other miniature has already claimed that region. And a region is defined by a homogeneous group of tiles. And a region is defined by a homogeneous connected group of tiles. And another thing players can do on their turn is decide if they want to buy different faction cards. And there's going to be cards for each faction, and these cards kind of act as a share in the faction because they will have a value and be worth victory points at the end of the game, but they also have different abilities that can be used in battles. And each faction is going to have a couple terrains that it prefers, and whenever tiles are connected to that faction's region with those matching terrains, it's going to allow that faction's value to go up. This is going to make the value of the card more, but it's also going to make purchasing those cards more expensive. So you're going to want to try and anticipate which factions are going to do well, and then try to encourage that and get these cards early so that you're spending less and then gaining more. And as players are putting out these different tiles, expanding the different regions on the board for each of the factions, eventually you're going to have 2 regions that are about to bump into each other. And if a player chooses to put a tile in an area that connects 2 different regions, you're actually going to be putting that tile face down, indicating that there is a battle that's going to happen here. And the initial strength that a faction has is going to be tightly related to its current value, but then players can also play their faction cards and the abilities of those faction cards to influence the battle in one way or the other. The only catch here is that any of the cards you play, you're only going to be getting half of them back, so you really don't want to have to play more cards than what it's worth to you. And after all the players have played all the cards that they want, you're going to be revealing them and resolving all their effects in order to determine which faction has won the battle. And that tile that was previously placed upside down is now going to get flipped up, connecting the 2 regions, and then the faction that lost is going to be removed from the region back to the supply, which is going to make this whole area now belong to the faction that won. So this can have some pretty massive effects. And the game continues like this, with players putting out more and more tiles, engaging in different battles and playing their cards until the end game trigger is reached, and the player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game. Also launching on September 6th, we have Quodd Heroes, the second edition, and this plays 2 to 6 players and takes about 40 to 90 minutes to play. And this is a game that offers all sorts of different scenarios for a bunch of different game modes. So you can be playing this as a free-for-all competitively, but it also offers a solo mode or cooperative mode, team versus team, as well as a racing mode. And in this game, each player is going to be playing as a Quodd hero, which is essentially these little creatures that are shaped like cubes. There's a whole bunch of different cubes that players can play as, and they are all very different with their own special abilities. And each side of the cube is going to have a different action associated with it. The new version is going to have a streamlined and updated rulebook, as well as upgraded artwork, pre-painted miniatures, and upgraded components. But I don't have quite as many pictures for the new version of the game, so I'm going to be referring to the original version just as I talk and explain how this game plays. And to start a game, players will choose their characters, take their associated player boards, and then set up the scenario according to the scenario that they chose from the scenario booklet. Now on a player's turn, they'll be able to play one card from their hand in order to give them some special abilities or resources, and then they'll be able to make one movement with their Quodd hero. And the way that movement works in this game is that you're actually going to be choosing a direction and then rolling your Quodd hero in that direction, and whichever side of your hero is face up, you're going to be looking at your hero board to determine which movement action is associated with that, and then you'll be able to further move your character according to that movement pattern. So there might be a certain movement pattern that you're going for, and you might just want to move in a particular direction in order to gain access to it. And the neat thing about these movement actions is that they can actually be updated in a couple different ways. You can actually flip the tile over in order to get a more advanced movement that might grant you more movement points, or even grant you additional cards that you can play into your hand. But you can also assign another tile to that movement tile in order to also upgrade it in various ways. And I did mention that each character does have a special ability, and in order to access that ability, you actually have to roll to your appropriate side because that ability will be associated with one of your sides, just like all these movements are. And there's a few more things to be concerned about outside your own character and your own character board, because out on the main board, there's going to be some different tiles and icons that can have some different effects, and if you roll into them, they could move, push, or rotate your hero in various ways, but they could also help you or damage you in other ways. So you'll always want to consider that when you're playing out your turn, and then the game continues like this until the end of the game is triggered depending on the scenario, and then the players that are able to complete the scenario are going to win the game. And if this sounds interesting to you, I have links in the description below. Also launching on September 6th, we have Rise and Fall, and this plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 40 to 80 minutes to play. And this is a competitive civilization strategy game that involves zero luck, and it also has a really cool 3D board. And this is going to allow different areas of the board to be elevated as you place those tiles on top of each other, creating different terrain from plains to forests to mountains. And this game has a really neat mechanism because on a player's turn, you're actually going to be pre-programming your actions by selecting a card that you want to play from your hand and then simultaneously revealing it. And I know at first that sounds like a mechanism that's in a lot of games, but the thing that makes this one cool is that you have access to all the actions on the card, and you only have access to the cards that you have associated meeples with out on the board, because each of the cards will be associated with a specific type of meeple, and if you don't have any of those meeples out on the board, then you're not going to have access to that card, and you're going to have to put it aside until you do. And the different actions will allow you to do different things, like place or move meeples to different areas of the board in order to collect the resources there, or even convert meeples into other types of units. And you do want to do this to some degree, because if you are able to get all your meeples out on the board, then that will allow you to unlock a special trophy that's worth victory points at the end of the game for that particular type of unit. Of course, in doing that, you're probably going to be converting a lot of your other meeples into those meeples, which means that you might lose a card or two. But the card's not necessarily out of the game forever, because if you're able to get more of those meeples out on the board, then you will get that card back. And the game continues like this over a series of rounds, with players choosing the card that they want to play from their hand, performing those actions to manipulate the board and their units. But while you're doing this, you're also trying to have the most majority of units in different areas of the board in order to maintain control there, and you're also trying to accumulate as much wealth as possible, because both these things are worth victory points at the end of the game, and you're going to be adding that to any of those objectives that you manage to reach, and then the player with the most victory points at the end of the game is going to win the game. And of course, I have links in the description below. Also launching on September 6th, we have Floor Plan, the Winchester Mystery House, and this plays 1 to 6 players and takes about 20 to 40 minutes to play, and this is a competitive roll and write where players are going to be building and designing the Winchester Mystery House. And if you're not familiar with what that is, it's one of the biggest houses ever built, and it's known for its architectural curiosities and its lack of any master building plan. And this is a building that has 10,000 windows, 2,000 doors, many of them that don't go anywhere or might walk you right off a balcony. And this house was just continually built over years and years and years with no real plan in sight. There was just a lot of little changes just being made constantly. But the way that this game actually plays is that once per turn, players are going to be rolling 2 dice in the center of the table, and then all players are going to be using those dice to either draw a new room into their house or draw new features into a room that they've already built. And every game is only going to be using 3 out of the 15 possible scoring cards, and they're all based on real designs and architectural elements of the real house. And as players are building out their house, they're going to be trying to match the different elements of these cards, and the first player that's able to complete 5 of their goals is going to trigger the end of the game. And one of the reasons that the artwork looks a little bit freaky here is because there's a lot of rumors about the house, and the reason for its design being to do with ghosts and trying to confuse the ghosts, because everyone knows that putting a lot of corridors and dead ends in your house confuses ghosts and they just get lost and give up trying to haunt you. But if you want to learn more and see what the actual game looks like, you'll definitely want to go ahead and sign up on their backer kit now, which I have a link to in the description below. And launching on September 6th, we have The Legacy of You, and this is a solo game that takes about an hour to play, and in this game you are tasked to deal with the flooding issues along the Yellow River, and in order to deal with those issues you're trying to fulfill the requirements of these various cards that are laid across this board, and as you fulfill the requirements of those cards, you're going to be removing that card from the board, revealing the canal underneath, as well as a new action location where you'll be able to put your workers during your action phase. But building these canals is not the only issue you have to deal with, because you're also going to be worrying about the river itself, as well as invading barbarians. The river is going to have this wave token that's moving across the board, and it's going to move up 1 space anytime that you need to draw a card from your deck, but there isn't any cards left to draw and you need to reshuffle it back into a draw pile. And the reason that you care about this is because you'll lose the game if that wave ever reaches a part of the river where you haven't already built a canal. But at the start of each round, you're going to be gaining a number of resources and cards equal to your income, and you do start the game with a base income, but you will be able to upgrade that as the game goes on. You're also going to be adding a number of barbarians into this card row at the top here, and this is going to take up spaces for other cards that are more useful to you, and if that row ever gets full of barbarians and you're not able to clear them, then you'll also lose the game. But every round you'll also be able to buy any of the non-barbarian cards from this row in order to add them to your deck. And the reason you want to get those cards into your hand is because you can play them to get a portion of the resources outlined on the card, and when that card gets put back into your draw pile, you'll be able to use it multiple times in a game, and it also makes your deck bigger so that it makes that wave move down the river a little bit slower, since you're going to be reshuffling your deck less often. But another option you have is to permanently discard a card from your hand, and that's going to allow you to get the same resources plus a bunch of extra ones. But it is making your deck smaller and you're getting rid of that card permanently. But there's one last thing you can do with these cards, and that's to slide it under your player board so that only the bottom portion of the card is visible, and that's going to get added to your income at the start of each round. But another action you can do on your turn is to fight off the barbarians, and in order to do that you're going to have to be using your worker meeples, and you have workers of different colors, and you need to match the same amount in colors as depicted on the card. And when you do that, you're going to get the reward that's outlined on the right side of the card, but for any barbarians that you are unable to clear before the end of the round, they're going to cost you 1 of the resources that are outlined on the bottom of the card, or if you're not able to do that, you're going to have to discard 1 of your cards from your hand. And like I said before, players can build a canal each turn, and whenever you do that you're going to be removing the card that is in that area, and underneath that card there's going to be a new worker placement action that you can perform that's going to allow you to convert some resources into another type of resource, but it's also going to unlock a little location where you can build a building. And in order to build a building, you're going to have to pay the cost of that building type. And there's 3 different types of buildings, and one will allow you to get more income, while others make workers a little bit more versatile, where they can count as a couple different colors. And then the last one will unlock new worker placement spots to help you in different areas of the game. And before I get too far ahead of myself, I should probably mention that this one is also my personal pick of the week. And the reason I'm picking this one is that I just think this one honestly looks like a lot of fun. I really like the different layers and options that this game provides and how everything is intertwined in some way or another. One reason that I'm not a huge fan of a lot of solo games is I find they're very intently focused on resource management, where you're just trying to collect different resources or generate them in different ways, while some other aspect of the game is pulling resources away from you. And although this game does do that to some degree, and most games do, this one just adds enough options and different variable mechanics that obfuscate that and allow you to do more things and chain different events together that I think make this a lot more fun than some other games that come to mind. And I'm a big fan of multiple lose conditions where your priority might change throughout the game because something is just getting cut a little bit too close. I also really love the artwork for this one, and it is designed by Shem Phillips that's created a ton of really excellent games, with a lot of them being in the top 100, so I think this just gives it a lot more confidence as a good back. So if you are a fan of his work, or if you really like solo games, or if you're neither of those things but this game just looks interesting to you, I definitely recommend checking it out, and you can go ahead and find the link in the description below where you can go ahead and click to get notified. Also launching on the 6th, we have Cult of Cathulhu, and this plays 4 to 11 players and takes about 5 to 15 minutes to play. And this is a hidden role deduction game where there are two types of players. There's the cultists who are trying to find their trustworthy brethren, and then there are the investigators that are trying to sneak into the cultist ritual and prevent their world-ending plans. Each player in the game is going to get 2 hidden cards. There's going to be your alignment card, which tells you whether you're a cultist or an investigator. And then there's going to be a skill card that's going to give you some sort of ability that you'll be able to use throughout the game. And the game plays over 3 different phases. There's the mission briefing, the council, and the voting phase. And during the mission briefing, it's going to allow the investigators to know which other players are their fellow investigators, and it will also allow them to know what their skills are. And then there's the council phase where players can freely discuss amongst each other and use their various skills. And they're going to be using those skills in order to try and gather information or to help or hinder the other players that they may trust or ones that they find questionable. And then we move into the voting phase, and at this point all the cultists are going to be trying to vote for another player that they also think is a cultist, and all the investigators are going to vote as well too, but they're pretty much just going through the motions not to give away their identity. And then all the cultist votes are going to be revealed, and if all the players that have the most votes are all cultists, then the cultist wins the game, but if any one of them are not a cultist, then the investigators win. And another game launching on the 6th is the Fox Experiment, and this plays 2 to 4 players and takes about an hour to play. And I think a lot of you are going to be really excited about this one because this one is co-designed by Elizabeth Hargrave, who designed one of the biggest games of all time, which is Wingspan. But instead of birds, this one is going to be all about raising foxes. And this one's a roll and write where each round you're going to be selecting a pair of foxes with certain traits to try and create offspring of the type of traits that you're looking for. Each of the traits in the game are going to be associated with a certain type of trait die, and then you're going to be taking those dice, rolling them, and then trying to move them around to make complete trait symbols, which you'll then mark off on your pup card. You're then going to gain trait tokens depending on how many of the traits you marked off, which you'll then use to upgrade tracks on your personal player board. But a really neat aspect of the game is the way that things kind of get recycled here, because at the end of each round you're going to be clearing all previous generations of foxes, and then the new pups are going to become candidates to be chosen as parents in the next round. And the game continues like this for a total of 5 rounds, and players are going to be adding up their victory points by completing both endgame and personal objectives, winning the Friendliest Fox Award, upgrades that they manage to do on their personal player board, and any extra tokens that they have at the end of the game will also have a conversion rate into victory points. And of course, the player with the most victory points wins the game. Also launching on September 6th, we have Weimar, the Fight for Democracy, and this plays 4 players and takes about 180 to 360 minutes to play. And in this game, players are playing as different parties, struggling to influence the economy, media, or foreign affairs. And the reason that they're doing this is to try and make game-changing decisions that support their regime. The players playing as the Democratic parties are going to be scoring points for creating stability and removing poverty, while the non-democratic parties will score points for coups and unrest. The game plays over a series of 6 rounds, and each round players are going to be playing one agenda card that defines their strategy for that turn, and this will define what sort of actions they have access to, and it might cause them to modify their 12 card play deck, find political issues, or get advantages with the public in the streets. And the game continues like this, with players choosing a card that they want to play, which will then modify either their deck, their board, or the rules around some aspects of the game, scoring victory points by fulfilling their general objectives. And the player with the most victory points at the end of the 6 rounds wins the game. Also launching on the 6th, we have History of the Ancient Seas 1, and since there's no H sound in the Greek language, it's pronounced LS. And this plays 2 players and takes about 120 to 360 minutes to play, and in this game players are going to be choosing to play either as Sparta or as Athens, and the goal is to become the leading empire. And you're going to be doing this by building armies and fleets in order to increase your strength, and moving units to conquer islands and provinces, expanding trade routes for resources, and developing your military skills, economic efficiency, and culture. And while you're doing all this, you're also going to be trying to maintain the wealth, happiness, and stability of your people. There's 8 possible actions in this game, but each round you're going to be only limited to a subset of those actions, and the actions chosen by a player can't be chosen subsequently by the next player. But essentially the different actions are going to have you going down a more peaceful route or a more war-torn route. Going with peace has more stability in leading your empire to the golden age of civilization, while war is more costly and uncertain, but comes with less restraints. And this is just the first in the series, so you can expect more to come in the future, and if you want to know more, I have links in the description below, and you can click to get notified. Also launching on the 6th, we have Explosions in the Laboratory, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 20 minutes to play, and this is a push your luck game that plays over 4 phases. The first phase is the planning phase, and this is where you're going to be able to play one-time use cards that can affect scoring for your turn. And then we move into the mixing phase, where a number of chemical cards from the deck are going to be laid out onto the table. This is going to let players know what chemicals they must mix. Throughout the game there's going to be a fire level that's increasing, and as that fire level grows, the more volatile the mixtures will become. Players will be drawing these cards, and then they'll be able to place them into their own flasks, and they can continue to do this until they decide to stop. And when they stop, they can score their mixture, but if they push too far and create one of the combos of chemicals in your flask that causes an explosion, then that's going to end your turn immediately and you won't get any points. And the player who has the most points at the end of the game wins the game. And launching on September 7th, we have Merchant's Cove Mastercraft, and this plays 1 to 5 players and takes about 60 to 90 minutes to play. And yes, I am wearing different clothes and it is morning now, so make sure to hit that like button if you appreciate the extra effort and time travel that I had to put into this one. But if you haven't heard of Merchant's Cove, this is actually an expansion for that game. This is a game that has a really unique design choice when it comes to asymmetry, because this is an asymmetrical game, but this game goes way beyond that, and you're actually going to be playing almost completely different games, because this game offers a lot of different mechanisms that are specific to each character. So depending on the character that you're playing as, your primary mechanism in the game might be tile placement, dice placement, grid movement, or resource management, or even something different with this new expansion. But there are elements of the game that also cross into the shared board. Players will want to manipulate this to their advantage because the rondel will affect timing of certain events and also turn order, and it might be more advantageous to have your turn later than sooner, so you might want to consider that. There's also a shared market where players can hire new staff, and players will be competing to get the staff that they're looking for. Each round brings new visitors to Merchant's Cove, and these are going to be meeples of different colors, and depending on their color, that's going to determine what types of goods that they're looking for. So players are going to be trying to produce those goods in order to fulfill those needs and score victory points. And the new expansion is going to be adding 4 new merchants to the game. The first one is the Mushroom Farmer, and I'll just go and show you a little bit of what their individual player boards look like. But then the second one is the Detective. And I expect this one might bring in a little bit of deduction and puzzly elements. And then we have the Treasure Diver, who's going to be lifting up different treasures and goods from the ocean floor. And then we have the Pastry Chef that's going to be using a little bit of a gear system as your resources are going to be rotating around the board as you try to create those delicious pastries. There's also a brand new board that gets added to the bottom of your existing board, and this is going to add a brand new mechanism and tracks for all the different factions. This expansion is also going to add a ton of brand new cards that you can just go ahead and mix into the game. And it'll also add new wizards to enchant your goods to make them worth even more, and rogues which will help you frame other players for your nefarious deeds. and if you're interested in this one, I have links in the description below. And launching on September 9th, we have Rivet Wars Reloaded, and this is a skirmish game for 2 players, but it also does have a solo mode, and this one takes about 30 to 60 minutes to play. And in this game, there are a couple ways to win. You can either be the first to score 10 victory points, or be the first to complete 3 missions that are gradually uncovered as the game progresses. And one thing to note with this game, and the reason it's called Rivet Wars Reloaded, is because this was a game that was previously released, and it was previously released by a different publisher, which was originally CMON, but this is being completely re-implemented by Steamforged Games, so you might see more changes than your traditional second editions, since this game is actually changing hands and being produced and developed by a completely different publisher. And if you haven't played this game, this is a game that plays over a series of rounds, and at the start of each round, players are going to be gaining an income of points and rivets, and you're going to be spending those in order to deploy your units. But the catch here is that the points have to be spent in the round that they were granted, whereas the rivets can transfer over into following rounds. The units in this game will have different health, strength, and movement points, but they also have different strengths and weaknesses depending on the units that they are opposing. And players will be trying to control different areas of the board in order to score victory points, and each round plays over 3 main phases, the first phase being the deploy phase, where players are going to be spending those rivets and points in order to deploy their units, and then there is the attack phase where all players get to attack, and then the movement phase where all players get to move. And this is an interesting sequence of events since your movement comes after your action phase, which means you're probably going to want to be planning out your attack on the previous round. But the different units can break the sequence of events in different ways, so depending on the units at your disposal, you might have a few more options. And some of the new changes to the game will be improved art, components, and miniatures, streamlining and cleaning up the rulebook, more variability to the map because the original game just had a stack of tiles that you could just piece together in various ways, but this one's going to be offering you tiles of different sizes and shapes, which just adds a lot more possibilities when piecing these maps together. I mentioned they added a solo mode, but there's also going to be a campaign mode as well, a new faction to play as, and the mission cards, which are an alternative way to win, which wasn't offered in the original game. This one looks like a ton of fun with a ton of improvements, so if you are interested in this one, or if you have played this one before and you want to see what's different, definitely check out the campaign, and I have links in the description below. Also launching on September 9th, we have Tales of War, and this is a skirmish game for 2 players. It takes about 30 to 45 minutes to play, and in this game, players are going to be taking turns activating one of their units at a time. You're going to have your units out on a main board, and the different units will have different equipment, which defines their special rules, and there are 25 different types of units in the game, each with their own unique abilities, strengths, and weaknesses. You're going to be starting with a small group of forces, but as the game continues, you'll be able to expand that to include more and more variety. And this is a game that doesn't use any dice or cards for combat. Instead, you simply move your units into an opposing unit's space, or move one of your ranged units so that your opponent's unit is within range. The game has a variety of different scenarios, so each game will have a different setup as well as different endgame objectives, and the first player to be able to fulfill that objective wins the game. And if you want to learn more about this one, I have links in the description below. And those are all the campaigns I have for you this week, but don't leave yet because we have a couple awesome giveaways to announce, and these are the easiest giveaways to enter ever. All you have to do is leave a comment down below. You don't have to like, you don't have to subscribe, you don't even have to leave a nice comment, but I still appreciate all those things, and I will be drawing the winner from the comments in my next episode, which will be the same time next week. So you want to check back then to see if you won, and also for all the great content. And the first giveaway we have is for an exciting one because this one was actually my pick of the week in last week's episode, and this one's called Uluk, and this is a worker placement game that I made some comparisons with the game known as Agricola, which is one of my favorite games ever made. And this one has a lot of similarities with that game. You're going to be managing your workers, creating new workers, and you're going to want to make sure that you're feeding them every round so that you don't lose victory points. And you will be collecting different resources through worker placement, but the thing that this game does a little bit differently is that you can actually convert those resources into other resources on your own personal player board. And of course, you have to activate the appropriate action space in order to do this, and that's also going to dictate what type of resource you want to convert into. And then you're just going to look at your own personal player board, and there's going to be different arrows connecting the different resources, and whatever arrow is leading to the resource that you're converting into, you can convert all the resources at the base of that arrow all at once. There's also all sorts of special ability cards that you can get throughout the game, as well as different monuments that help make some resources a little bit more beneficial to you, and the player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game. And to enter this giveaway, just leave a comment down below with the hashtag Uluk and let us know of one of your most favorite worker placement games. And the next giveaway we have is for a pledge for Space Lion, and this is a really interesting card combat game that plays from 2 to 5 players. And what makes this game so interesting is the way that the combat works. So in this game there's going to be some different lanes, and on your turn you're going to be assigning cards from your hand to either your left lane, your right lane, or the center lane. The left lane is going to attack the player on your left, the right lane is going to attack the player on your right, and the center lane attacks all players. But the way this works is that whoever has the highest strength in a given lane is going to win that battle, and all cards are placed face down and then simultaneously revealed, and you will have a few options at your disposal when the cards are revealed, and you also have some special planning options that you can use to plan for further turns. And the whole objective here is to destroy your opponent's bases, because if you are the winner, then you are the only person who doesn't get their base damaged. And to enter this giveaway, just leave a comment down below with the hashtag Lion and let us know of one of your most favorite card battler games. For myself, this actually isn't a genre I've played too much, but it is a genre I like, so I should probably try to play these more often. But I did like Keyforge, except for I found that the games could sometimes just go on forever. And I'm going to kind of break my own rules here and say that my favorite card battler is Super Fantasy Brawl. The game does have a board and it does have miniatures, so I don't know if it quite qualifies, but the gameplay does feel very much like your typical card battler, and it's one that I've played a lot, and I really do like the game, and I would say that it did replace Keyforge for me. But now let's go ahead and draw the winner for last week's giveaway, and this one was for a copy of Trailblazers. And to go ahead and draw a winner, I use this fancy application here, and all these extra names down here are bonus entries for my Patreon subscribers. If you like this sort of content and you want to help out the channel and make all these efforts just a little bit more sustainable for me, I truly appreciate the support, and you can find links to my Patreon in the description below. But let's go ahead and grab those comments and draw a winner. So I paused my filming for a second because I accidentally put in the wrong URL, so I fixed that, and then I drew the winner, and then I realized I forgot to unpause the video, so I didn't actually record that part. You're just gonna have to trust me on it. But our winner was Martin Lindberg, and I had asked the viewers to let us know which they preferred, kayaking, trail hiking, or biking. And Martin says that he prefers hiking, as a whole family can do it together, even with small kids. And I love that answer because sometimes just doing something together is better than just doing something. Just email me at adam@shelfclear.com and I'll get that pledge all sorted out for you. And that's all I have for you this week. So as always, thanks so much for watching, and until next time, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.
Oh.